Hi everyone, this is Bob Raposa, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our 2020 NMTC conference. I'm going to turn things over to our board member Joe Flatley to do the honors with Chairman Neal. Joe.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Flatley. I'm CEO of the Massachusetts Housing Investment Corporation. We're a 30-year-old nonprofit CDFI that's been providing financing to affordable housing and community development throughout New England. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Chairman Neal this morning. Congressman Neal has been a true friend and supporter to community development for decades, starting while he was mayor of Springfield and continuing as chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Chairman Neal knows as well as anyone how the New Markets Tax Credit Program can transform a community, bring back jobs, improve healthcare access, expand daycare options, and bring back Main Street communities. Chairman Neal was the lead sponsor of the New Markets Tax Credit extension legislation in multiple congressional sessions, and we have him to thank for boosting the upcoming round of New Markets allocations from $3.5 billion to $5 billion. That's going to make a big difference across Massachusetts and in communities he represents like Holyoke and Springfield. Chairman Neal is the dean of both the Massachusetts delegation and the New England congressional delegation. He is at-large whip for the House Democrats. We've learned that he's one of the most thoughtful leaders in Congress who has spent more than 3 decades fighting for affordable housing, jobs, and opportunities for his working class district. Please join me in virtually welcoming Congressman Neal this morning.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for those very kind remarks and a nice word to Bob, who's been a terrific advocate on behalf of New Markets tax credits here on Capitol Hill. So it's really nice for me to have a chance to talk to people who are like-minded today on the call, and pleased to participate in your annual conference. Count me, as you do now and in the future, to remain a vigorous supporter of the New Markets tax program. As Joe noted, I'm a former mayor, so I know just how important revitalization is, particularly for communities in economic distress. Distress which has only been exacerbated by the pandemic. In my district, the city of Holyoke has a total population of less than 40,000 people. Of that number, 11,228 had incomes below the poverty line, for a poverty rate of 28.6%. It makes sense to me that New Markets tax credits should be at work in Holyoke, and they are. There are 7 New Markets tax projects in Holyoke, ranging from a community health center and hospital projects to a high-tech computing center. My district is not a unique case. The achievements of this initiative over its 2 decades span our entire country. Through 16 New Markets tax credits rounds, CDFI fund has made over 1,200 allocation awards totaling $61 billion in tax credit authority. $52.5 billion in New Markets have been invested in low-income communities since the program's inception through fiscal year 2019. In fact, in 2019, during that round, New Markets recipients once again pledged to exceed the IRS requirements on low-income community investment. This translates into an additional $450 million flowing into these communities. Now, I know these successes don't come as a surprise to you. This initiative only works because of all the good work that you do as advocates and as implementers. And it's that work that I relied upon at this time last year when New Markets were up for renewal. At the end of 2019, I successfully pushed not only to extend the New Markets tax credits through 2020, but also to increase the allocation by over 40% to $5 billion. And I and other supporters of this initiative in Congress didn't stop there. In February of this year, I added $1 billion in additional New Markets volume to assist Puerto Rico with their disaster and to help them through this excruciating period of time. In June, the House took up H.R. 2, the Moving Forward Act, to improve our nation's infrastructure. I want to tell you, that was a really good piece of legislative work between the Infrastructure Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. That bill, which traveled through my committee on its way, included a permanent extension of new markets at $5 billion, as well as $3.5 billion in additional allocations phased in over a 3-year period to help with economic recovery. While this legislation has not made it through the Senate, I hope that President-elect Joe Biden will consider helping us to chart this course for progress during 2021. I think we will have a great partner in the President-elect. Joe Biden has gained an appreciation for new markets when he oversaw the implementation of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which the Ways and Means Committee had a major role in. I was very proud of our work. This legislation increased the new markets tax credit allocation level to $5 billion a year over 2 years to help communities recover, unleashing unprecedented investment in areas of extreme poverty. The new markets delivered $23.6 billion in total project financing to over 1,200 projects in hard-hit communities between 2009 and 2011. These investments directly created or retained 85,000 permanent jobs, 94,000 construction jobs at a time when the economy was in free fall. But before we get to the new Congress and the new Biden administration, we have some additional work to do this year. The New Markets program is facing another extension deadline at the end of this month. Please know I'm working hard to get as long an extension as possible, accompanied by an allocation boost. We all know that the program is oversubscribed and that its year-over-year renewal creates too much uncertainty. While many factors come into play during the year-end negotiations, it's my hope that we can use the program's success to argue for a multi-year extension. I also understand that economic circumstances caused by the pandemic has had a significant impact on credit pricing. I also support improvements to help diversify and improve the investor market, improvements that, like the program itself, have bipartisan, bicameral backers in Congress. It's hard to give any single piece of advice as you guide yourselves through the year-end advocacy, but it would be one essential ingredient. We always need to tell the stories about how successful new markets have been. Make sure that your representatives in Congress know the economic development that it has brought to your district and states and the challenges you face because of the pandemic. A reminder, as I always say, at a groundbreaking or ribbon cutting or in terms of advocacy, but for new markets, the initiative would not have happened. So as long as you continue your advocacy on behalf of new markets and keep it at the top of our minds for our membership, that I hope many of which are on the call, I'm confident that we will find a path towards renewal. Thanks again for having me and for all the good work that you do in your communities. I hope next time I get to see you, whether it's in person or virtually, hopefully in person, but there will be a new Congress with an already renewed and strengthened new markets tax credit program. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chairman Neal. We do have a question here, and I'm going to thank you for offering to take questions from the audience and let folks know that if you have additional questions, please feel free to type them into the question box and I will read through them as long as we have available time or until we are out of questions. So, Chairman Neal, the Democrats' majority in the House shrunk in the 2020 election. How will How will that affect prospects for enacting infrastructure and other legislation President-elect Biden will propose, especially for economic recovery?
Well, I think Joe Biden's entirely serious about infrastructure. I spoke with him about that, and I have been in direct contact with his new staff members that will be inside of the White House about the urgency of infrastructure, getting off to a really good start with something that I believe can pass the House and the Senate and be signed into law. Recall that the Moving Forward Act, which included the Green Act, which the Ways and Means Committee authored, it's a really good piece of legislation, by the way, and it was meant to harness energy without scaring off the other side, but very suitable in terms of promoting renewables as we proceed to infrastructure. But the point that I want to make is that the country desperately needs it. Remember that President Trump volunteered $2 trillion. I was at that meeting when he suggested that. We came in at 1.5 trillion. So there's a bit of a juxtaposition of traditional advocacy. At the same time, highways, roadways, bridges, rail, airports, sewer and water, and the expansion of broadband all play a major part. I would also favor some assistance to local communities for school rebuilding or new construction, although in Massachusetts we have an extraordinary record of new school building across the state. It's really underreported how successful that's been, and also some help for housing. So I think that I've urged the Vice President, former Vice President, President-elect, to start with the Moving Forward Act and the Green Act that we included as the position that we all ought to take, get it up, do it again, get it over to the Senate, and then let the President-elect, at that time, after January 20th, President Biden, begin the round of negotiations with the Senate. There is support with Republicans as well. We have to be able to figure out how to cultivate that support and get it signed into law.
Thank you, Chairman. Do you have any suggestions on how we explain to Republican senators that community development credits are so critical to infrastructure legislation?
Well, I have a lot of suggestions for them. Sometimes they choose to accept them, and sometimes they choose to ignore them. But I do think that there is no substitute for the visual success of these community development initiatives. A reminder that while urban areas tend to tilt blue, not to miss the point that it's a great initiative that has a traditional function that I think that is generated by public support with private investment. And I think that that ought to be the rallying point. That ought to be the opportunity for explaining why these initiatives get underway, but most importantly, why they wouldn't get underway if we didn't have this tax favor initiative.
Thank you. So that was from our member, Michael Phillips. I have a question from Stephen Cooper from Law 360. Why does it make sense to expand a business tax break line like the NMTC when Congress hasn't agreed to extend UI or the stimulus checks?
Well, I'm glad that was mentioned because the Ways and Means Committee, we authored those initiatives. And I indicated Saturday night in a long conversation with Speaker Pelosi why, once again, UI needed to be at the top of our proposal. And if you wanted to condense what happened in the CARES Act, and let me vigorously defend the CARES Act, largely because some of the criticism that's come of it. The reminder of the CARES Act is this: it saved the American economy. It was based upon creating liquidity and simultaneously demand, but it was also based upon the fact that the supplemental part of unemployment insurance would allow people to pay their rents, make their mortgage payments. We didn't want the contagion to leach into community banking problems, credit union problems, so we were affirmative. It overwhelmingly passed the House, but one Democrat voted against it. That was all. And I call that up because we were trying to buy time to create an arena of stability, which we've had some success at, even as the virus resurges. But we needed money for our hospitals, unemployment insurance, the retention tax credit. Those initiatives all came from the Ways and Means Committee. And I worked hand in glove with Speaker Pelosi. We created on a Friday night, sometime I think around March 8th or so, that was the Friday night, with the Ways and Means staff in her office, and we drafted the parameters of the CARES Act with Secretary Mnuchin on the line. And we need to do it again. And we need to do it reminding people of the role that unemployment insurance has played to give those on the outside a cushion. We lost 22 million jobs because of COVID. Of that number, 12 million have been reestablished. That's still 10 million people that lost their jobs because of COVID. What's happening in the restaurant industry is terrible. But of those 10 million, they're added to the 10 million who are collecting unemployment insurance, which means 20 million people as we proceed to this the holiday season here are receiving unemployment insurance. It has to be renewed, and there has to be a supplement as well to it. You know, sometimes you come across issues economically, which the Ways and Means Committee specializes in, and that's why I've been pretty measured in the way I approach this. I do subscribe to mainstream economics, but the following. Economists left, right, and center said you need to do something about unemployment insurance. That's essential. We did it, and we need to do it again.
Thank you, Chairman. So this question comes from Patrick Durkee from Empirical Foods. There was a huge push made a few years ago regarding opportunity zones and how they were the next big thing in funding redevelopment. And he notes that, for his opinion, that in some ways that's largely failed. Can you explain why new markets are more effective where opportunity zones failed?
Well, I mean, I think that the capital gains portion of the opportunity zones has created a lot of controversy. But, you know, way back, I remember when Jack Kemp was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, he came to Springfield and we worked on opportunity zones at that time. So this was but another iteration. Charlie Rangel, the former chairman of the committee, was a big champion of the notion of the enterprise zone or the opportunity zone, but it never really functioned quite the way that we all wanted it to. And in the case of new markets, they have functioned the way we wanted them to. They have worked, and the evidence is overwhelming, if not compelling, as to how they've worked. You know, during my mayoral years, and working for a former mayor when I was 23 years old as his assistant, one of the things that Richard Nixon did and Gerald Ford did is they transformed assistance programs to cities and towns. They moved away from categorical assistance to a system that was more modeled on local initiative and what mayors and others decided at the local level were the priorities. So that was the basis of revenue sharing, which was a big boost at that time, but it was also the establishment of what was known as the Community Development Block Grant Program, which worked wonders. But the allocation for Community Development Block Grant money, I mean, it's been cut by more than 2/3 over these years. So I follow this pretty carefully. And there are really limited resources and opportunities for mayors to do some innovative and creative thinking. New markets fills the void. So I would defend this initiative anywhere in any forum. I've exercised these chances to promote them across my congressional district, but I always remind people, as I said repeatedly through this call, but for that credit, the initiative doesn't get off the ground, period.
Thank you, Chairman Neal. One last question for you. What is the current status of COVID-19 legislation? If passed, will it include rental assistance relief?
It has to, and I think something's going to pass here, I hope, in the next few days. The speaker's pretty earnest. I'm in regular contact with her about this, and I think that the holdup right now is a bit of an impasse over two issues that I think can be resolved. And I think that I talked to Governor Baker extensively through this, at least every other day, every couple of days. Talked to him on Sunday as I was coming in from the airport. Talked to him on last Friday night as well. And he is a major proponent, as you know, of state and local aid. That is not well subscribed by a lot of Republican senators. So I urged him to get after them, and he has. But we need, in this new package, there's a proposal of $160 billion for state and local government that I hope would get us past where we find ourselves with this sort of standoff. But there's, I think, at least broad agreement that something has to be done. And I know the negotiations are taking place right now because I did, as I noted, talk with Speaker Pelosi yesterday.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Neal. We really appreciate you being here for this year's conference virtually, and we hope to have you attend as a keynote in person very soon.
Thank you.